All right, folks, immigration in the progressive era.
Americans at the time were often fearful of things they found strange or different than the culture they were used to. This fear extended to the new wave of immigrants that were entering America from the late 1800s through the first 2 decades of the 1900s. These new immigrants, mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, brought an influx of Catholics and Jews to American cities, where previously the majority of citizens were Protestants.
All right, so here we have a second wave of immigration from Eastern Europe, from Southern Europe, very Western Russia. All right, so we have Russian Jews, we have Italians, we have Polish, we have Lithuanian. All right, and we have people who tend to be Catholic. All right, and shall I say that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant reaction to their entrance into this country wasn't always the best. What you see in this picture here are immigrants arriving at Ellis Island.
Unlike the previous waves of immigrants who assimilated well to the American way of life, immigrants from countries like Italy, Russia, and Poland brought with them different languages, as well as different religions, and this made assimilation increasingly difficult.
All right, that's a very, very nice way of saying that the Anglo-Saxons in the United States felt that these immigrants were more different than previous immigrants. They were so different that they were so difficult to Americanize, to inculcate with American good middle class values of this. They apparently lack the work ethic, and they just don't get it.
As a result of the public's dislike for the new immigrants, the progressives of the period did little to help them. Left to their own devices, the immigrants banded together in their own communities and
All right, so as I will have mentioned in other places, all right, immigrants tended, I'm sorry, progressives tended to, again, they were a wide variety of folks who held various beliefs, but on the whole, on the average, progressives that had more power and influence tended to be somewhat racist and somewhat anti-immigrant. Again, the more wealthy you were and the more male you were, the more true that probably was about you. Okay, so immigrants did things that would have agreed with Southern segregationists at times. All right, working to segregate northern cities, for example. They would send investigators into pubs, into bars, to see if the bartender was serving single women who were not accompanied by a man, or if they were serving an interracial crowd. And if they were found to be doing so, they would write a very angry letter to them, threatening to take away their liquor license, which they couldn't do themselves for the most part. But they had friends who could do it. They had connections. All right. If they were found to be violating the rules of the unofficial rules of segregation or gender propriety, proper behavior, if they were caught a second time, then they would get their friends to shut down that bar's or that dance hall's liquor license, and that would be the death knell of that business. Okay, uh, and immigrants, progressives, at least those who had power, did not do much to help out immigrants either.
formed organizations aimed at helping one another.
So what you just missed there is, as a result, immigrants tended to form like self-help groups. They were their own safety net.
The only major help new immigrants received from native citizens came in the form of settlement houses.
So settlement houses were the progressives who did help, and they tended to be women, right? So at the turn of the century, more women were attending college. Your middle to upper class women were attending college, but they could not become professors. So women like Jane Addams, got their PhD, but they could not become a professor. So they would have settlement houses in urban areas. Like Jane Addams had a famous settlement house in Chicago. Think back to Reverend Pease's House of Mission, but with less condescension and less judgment, although that still was there. But again, remember, the tendency was the more female you were, the less wealthy you were, the less judgmental you were in your help. Okay, um, so these settlement houses were where the middle progressive women would become involved in working class labor activity, like the Women's Trade Union League (WTUL) in New York City, for example, would help out women who were on strike. Um, they would have classes for working class women to try and help them get promotions in their factories and so on and so forth. Uh, so the settlement houses tended to be the most pure form of progressive efforts to try and reform the working class.
Settlement houses such as Hull House, founded by Jane Addams in the late 1800s,
That's Hull, Hull.
helped immigrants to better assimilate by teaching them English and helping them understand American customs. By 19...
And again, that was a fine line. Are you helping them understand American customs, or are you trying to make them like you, to be a clone of you, that kind of thing? All right. So there was kind of like a battle here, internal battle, where progressives were trying to get immigrants to forget their old world ways, and to progressives, being an American meant acting like them and only like them. But to these new immigrants, to them it was a mixture. Let's keep some of the old world, but also some of the new world we're entering.
1800, over 100 settlement houses existed in the ethnic communities of the nation's largest cities. Asian immigrants, however, were completely left out of progressive policies. In 1902, a federal law was passed that effectively stopped immigration from China. The Chinese had been...
That's 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act. Right.
Instrumental in building the Transcontinental Railroad.
What the video is getting at here is Chinese labor was very instrumental in building the Transcontinental Railroad, from East Coast, from one coast to the other, that finally met at Promontory Point, Utah, which you see in the picture there. But shortly after it was completed, oh, you know what? We're going to restrict Chinese immigration.
But they were intensely disliked by anti-immigrationists who felt that Asians were stealing jobs that could have gone to native-born Americans.
And the racist phrase that Anglo-Saxons would use and others would be the yellow peril.
Anti-Asian sentiment was fueled by the nation's conservative newspapers, who called them the yellow peril.
Like I just said. So in a nutshell, basically, like I keep saying, progressives they're a hard group to summarize briefly. All right. Some were quite racist and anti-immigrant. Some were not. All right. Again, the ones that tended to be wealthier and more powerful and male tended to be the racist anti-immigrant folks like Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt.